All right, so now we want to flip it around and show you some firefighter scientists. We talked about the importance of academic and community-based partnerships and how those dyads of fire departments connect with academia. So let me introduce our next session by telling you about our Torches Fellowship program. So for those of you that have had the opportunity to join us in years past, you learned that last year we launched the Torches Fellowship program. It was by design, the idea of us bringing firefighters closer inside to the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. While we work with them closely in the design and advisory of the projects that are done in a translational science approach, the idea was that can we expose a firefighter to the science, have them nominate a project that they need to do locally in their fire department. And that's how the Torches Fellowship was born. So this year, I'm proud to share with you the findings and the progress of our Torches Fellows and what they've been doing the last 12 months since you met them here. So before I introduce them, I'll ask them to join me here on stage. So you have Chief Dr. Brian O'Neill from our San Antonio Fire Department and firefighter paramedic Lara Foster from Huntington, West Virginia. So we've allocated time in today's session to allow each of these presenters to give you a little bit of insight into their projects and what it was like to be a Torches Fellow. We met with them every other Thursday in actual former didactic classes online to indoctrinate them into ethical considerations, IRB, research. I'm indebted to our FCI team for the time that they've been able to spend with our firefighters, to Dr. Sali, to Captain Sali, who together we spent a great amount of time with our fellows launching these projects. So I'm going to ask each of them to present. Our first presenter is going to be Dr. Chief Brian O'Neill. He currently serves as the Deputy Chief of Support Services for the San Antonio Fire Department, overseeing multiple divisions, including training, safety, and health and wellness. With over 23 years of fire service experience, he is deeply involved in committees focused on firefighter health, safety, and cancer prevention at the local and at the state level in Texas. Dr. O'Neill also teaches in graduate programs at Oklahoma State University and Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and he frequently advocates for firefighter wellness at the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation as an advocate for Texas. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Chief O'Neill as he presents on his program on cancer survivorship. Let me get you your clicker.
Where's the clicker? Yeah.
Have the clicker. C-shift. The green one to the big green one to advance it.
Okay. I'm honored to be here speaking to you today. I'm honored to be a fellow with Torches, to learn from Dr. Caban, Dr. Sully, and Lara has been a great experience. So. You can see, do I got to push this to start it?
Good luck.
Oh, okay. Did not show the front. How do I back it up? There you go. I want to show that. Okay. So that's my the topic of the research I'm going to start conducting here shortly. Cancer survivorship, a critical analysis of the reintegration experiences of firefighter cancer survivors. The reason I came to this topic is through experience. I'm a third-generation firefighter. I joined the fire department in 2001, and in that time, I have witnessed several of our firefighters diagnosed with cancer. Since 2012, we've had close to 70, so we have a lot of cancer survivors within the San Antonio Fire Department. One of those cancer survivors is my best friend I grew up with. His name's Jason Hoover. He's cool if I say his name. So Jason, we went to high school together, middle school together. I convinced him to join the fire department with me. And 15 years into his career, he was diagnosed with stage 3 kidney cancer. And we worked together. And I saw him go through that survivorship experience. I had never witnessed it that close and hand before, and I saw his mental struggles with coming back to work, his financial struggles, all the components that we know as firefighters that perhaps the general public does not know about. And so I wanted to investigate that as an administrator now. I spent 20 years in the field, but the last couple years I've been an administrator, and I understand that we need better policies and we need better frameworks to follow to reintegrate our firefighters and really take care of them. So that's the background of why I chose this topic. So with that, the scope of the presentation, well, I should have brought my glasses, but I want to talk about why this topic's important. We talk about the aim and the objectives. Oh, thank you. The preliminary research review and the research question, and we're getting into the methods a little bit, and then the proposed timeline. Let me back that up. Something really important is you'll see the definition of survivorship from the National Cancer Institute. And I think what's important about that definition is we're talking about the whole firefighter, right? The whole person, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the social, and the financial effects. These are the things that affect firefighters and affect everybody who have cancer. Okay, so why is this topic important? Well, we all know most of us here know the IARC, right? We know that firefighting is a occupation that has high cancer risks and can cause cancer among some of us. We know that overall survivorship is increasing, and we know that firefighters in particular have unique stressors and unique challenges when it comes to survivorship. You'll see some quotes on some of these slides, a lot of them from Dr. Sully's study. She did a study along with several others on firefighter survivor experiences. So those two pictures there, the IARC, but then also next to it is a wellness fair we host every year in the San Antonio Fire Department, and that's part of that survivorship experience that helps these firefighters move along in their careers. So the research aim and objectives, we want to analyze the reintegration experiences of firefighters, cancer survivors, using a theoretical approach to guide policy and practice improvements, and that's the key to this. It's that actionable step from the research. That's what we're trying to achieve here. We want to ultimately achieve some sort of framework that fire department administrators and firefighters can use to better assist firefighters when they return to work. So the literature review revealed several themes, firefighter culture, which has been talked about a lot. We know that the culture of the fire service has traditionally been a lot of bravado, we don't talk about our problems, our feelings, our illnesses, and in fact, we know that there's a lot of firefighters within our own department who have cancer, who haven't even really reported it to the department. We know there's a huge mental health component. Dr. Wilson talked about that intersectionality between cancer and mental health, and that's a huge deal, and that's what I witnessed with my friend Jason, was the mental health challenges that he had, wanting to take care of his son, wanting to do the job that he loved, needing to try to make that point in your career where you can get a pension, right? That's a big thing with fire departments, is our pension. And a lot of the general public doesn't understand that. So the general public may say, well, if you have cancer from your job, why don't you retire and do something else? But they don't understand all the nuances of our job, the passion for the job first, our identity for the job, but also things like the pension and things that we need to do to continue to support our families. Physical health, of course, changes on outlook. So I'll go back to my friend Jason. He quit trying to promote because he didn't want to get in a position where he was exposed to more fire. He took a chief's aide position and has been there since because he doesn't want to be exposed to smoke. So that changed his whole career path. And then peer support, existing support. Dr. Wilson talked about peer support. That has been shown to be the most beneficial thing to firefighters is peer support in physical and mental health. So all the firefighters here know we sit down at the kitchen table, have some coffee, and we talk. That's the most important thing that we know exists for our mental health. Okay, so the research question then is, what are the reintegration experiences of firefighter cancer survivors, and what support mechanisms and policy changes can fire departments implement to improve the reintegration experience? And that's a picture of one of our firefighters at our wellness fair getting a checkup. Okay, I won't go too deep into this, but this is the methodology we're going to use initially. It's going to be qualitative. I really think that experiences are best represented when you talk to people. You get to understand the deep, rich nuances of their experiences. And you could use a qualitative analytical method called grounded theory to code that data and to create that framework that I'm talking about. And then you can advance this into a more generalizable type framework by doing a mixed method study, taking a survey like the WellBQ with NIOSH and maybe tweaking it a little bit to be more firefighter specific. So that would be the ultimate goal of this study. So data collection, again, it's going to be interviewing firefighter cancer survivors. This could be light duty, modified duty, full duty, but they're at work. Maybe they were off for months or years or weeks and they had to come back to work, or maybe they never actually went off. They just had the diagnosis and continue to work, but that reintegration experience is in their mind as well. Maybe they physically didn't take time away from the job, but mentally they come back a different person because now they know they have cancer. So again, methods, you code with grounded theory, you create code, concepts, and categories, and you start to build a framework. So we use a questionnaire that we're gonna look at the initial experiences. So we want to start from the beginning of survivorship, from that diagnosis point. How does the culture and the policies within the fire department affect that? What are their initial support resources? So what's helping as well? And then the reintegration experience, we move into that. So that picture there, that is our cancer committee. The core of our cancer committee, those are our advocates, Dan Bartow, Hoyt Allen, Carlos Escobar. Two of them are sitting right in front of me over here. And then to the left is our fire chief, our new fire chief, Valerie Frosto. We were very blessed in the San Antonio Fire Department to have a fire chief that supported our cancer prevention initiatives, and Chief Frosto is the same way, so we're blessed to have her. So we'll go into the personal and the professional impact. So we know that family is a big factor. Our staff, nurse practitioner, psychiatrist, says that most of our issues within the fire department are actually family related. We take the stresses of the job home to our families, and they're the ones that bore that burden of our job more than anyone else. And the same thing with somebody who's struggling mentally with the cancer survivorship experience. And then we want to, of course, see what recommendations our participants have for moving this research forward, for developing that framework. We want to be able to provide recommendations for fire departments to help change and improve their policies and practices. So the timeline is we've already built the research tools. We've done a lot of the literature review and the setting up of the methods we want to use. Waiting to get IRB approval, and then we'll start the research. And then hopefully next year, I'll be blessed enough to be invited back to help share the results of that research. So what are the key takeaways? Well, firefighter cancer survivors have unique challenges, and we need to do something for them specifically as opposed to different occupations. So we want to develop a comprehensive reintegration experience programs. We want to enhance their support systems and resources, and we want to affect policy and practice, and we could do that best through research. In my career, I have found that most of the things that I've been able to recommend to our department and make change was supported by research. So I think that's critical. And with that, I'll take any of your questions.
So any questions for Chief O'Neill? Sorry. Or from online, from our team that? No questions from our firefighters? How'd you get involved? Okay. we'll do one here for the front. Okay,
Vinny's got a question.
Chief, I congratulate you on seeing a part of the problem that certainly I had not ever thought of before. Usually we think of cancer as prevention or treatment. You're looking at it from sort of the other side, you know, coming out from the far side, and I think your efforts are to be applauded for your insight and your efforts to move this forward. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vinny.
Chief, the one question I've got, you talked about the family aspect of it. How much input as far as your research and your interviews are you going to get from the family side of that to bring that into reintegrating them back to the job?
So I think that's a great question. I think that's something we could advance the research into. I think that's another level. We could address the firefighters now, and as we learn more about them, start to reach into the families and see what we can learn from them, what we can do to support the families as well. Too often with families, we're not proactive, we're reactive. We wait for a family member to call us and let us know that their firefighter's struggling when maybe we should be calling them or reaching out to them to see how they're doing, not just with cancer, but with just about everything else. You know, as being in the fire service, that we're exposed to a lot of things, mental health things that families can't even understand, right? So that's why that peer support at the fire station is so valuable, because we can understand each other. When we see terrible things, those things, even to our spouses, even to our people that are most dear to us, is just something you can't relate to unless you've been there. And I think that's critical for us to understand, that the families are going to struggle to make that connection as well.
Chief, I got a question for you. So kudos to you for getting involved with such a time-intensive initiative at your level in your department. So can you speak about the time commitment? And I think this is a fantastic program, because we need more soldiers in this war, especially the translators of the research. So should we be encouraging younger or earlier in their career firefighters to participate in this as well? And then what was the time commitment? Because weighing and doing both had to be a tremendous challenge for you.
Yeah, it's a significant time commitment, especially once we start doing the interviews. Focus groups can take a while to set up and take a while to achieve if we're really going to gather good, deep, data. And thankfully for technology, things like Zoom enable that sort of thing. Before, to be honest with you, I think the reason why there's a big, at least to me, a big increase in practitioners who are also becoming researchers is because of technology. But prior to the technological advances of being able to talk to people across things like Zoom and platforms like that, you had to commit your whole career to be a proficient researcher, because it is a huge time commitment. So far, it hasn't been overwhelming for me, because I've enjoyed the process of learning and developing the research project. But once we actually start collecting and analyzing the data, it's going to be time intensive. That all being said, I find that our younger firefighters are more passionate about this than anybody. They're more health aware than my generation. And I think a lot of them would be interested in research. And that's the generation that I think we're looking at to be the generation that changes the cancer issue in the fire department. We always talk to our cadets when they come in, and one of the things we say is, we want your class to be the one that gets through without a cancer diagnosis. And I think we're headed that direction.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Believe it or not, the fellows have actually taught Natasha and I a lot more than I think we taught them, in many, many different ways. Being able to spend our close, intimate time together, talking about science and projects, we've learned a lot about the intersection of science and firefighter practice and fire science. And I think hopefully these projects will sort of enrich more their local home departments as they do. All right, so let me stop being mushy and introduce our our next Torches Fellow to speak. Okay, all hailing from West Virginia, we have fellow Lara Foster. Sorry, big program. Okay, here we go. Firefighter Foster is a Torches Fellow at FCI. She is a firefighter, paramedic, and board member of the Green Valley Volunteer Fire Department in Cabell County, West Virginia. With 8 years of experience as a volunteer firefighter and a certified paramedic in West Virginia, she has also a background in higher education as an assistant professor in business, sports management, and applied social research. In her primary role, Ms. Foster works as a transition agent for a state-funded program helping West Virginians in recovery and re-entry access to educational training and career development opportunities to overcome employment barriers. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Firefighter Foster. The red one is to go back.
Red one is to go back. Yes. Green is to advance. Hello, everyone. I'm going to pull a Kevin and encourage you to stand up if you need to. We all need to. Go ahead. You can stand up. It's fine. Go ahead. Stand up. Do your thing. Stretch it out. I'll start talking. I want to say thank you for nobody stood up. Okay, I got a couple. Thank you. Appreciate y'all. Awesome. Thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to learn from some of the greatest in the world doing this research, right? And caring for us. Like Dr. Caban said, I am a volunteer firefighter, right? And that'll be a part of the research as well. So thank you, Dr. Caban Martinez. Thank you, Dr. Soleil. And thank you, Chief Dr. Brian O'Neill, right? I got him, yeah. The mentorship along the way has been so encouraging. And we actually came up with another research question while I was just sitting there because Brian had mentioned the family. So, and thank you for everyone else who's in the room who's giving me advice. Vinny, shout out to you. And for you all for giving me a voice at the table because that matters. We're going to try this. First things first. It was kind of quiet. I spoke to her out in the hallway, but it was kind of quiet. I want to remind you that we are worthy. Yeah, thank you. I see a head shake. Yeah, we had some conversations last night. This research wasn't easy. Doing what we do is not easy. And y'all are paid, and we're volunteers. It's not easy for any of us, right? So I want to pop up some of these resources. Again, this is by nature of my day job, my primary occupation, which is important in our research when we go into volunteer firefighters, right? By nature of my occupation and what I do on the side in volunteering, you need to have these resources. If you need help, reach out, speak to someone. I stopped 3 times in my interviews, in my semi-structured interviews while I was doing my research to ensure that my guys, right, my guys is a theme, and you'll talk about that, but to make sure my guys had the resources that they need in that moment, because I could see that they were hurting, right, but they were processing through some things, right? So make sure that you're taking care of each other, and we are taking care of each other, because again, it's not easy work necessarily what we do, both as researchers for firefighters and cancer prevention, and then also doing the firefighting first responders. So just sharing with that. So last year, when I attended the symposium, I was overwhelmed. Can I get my first timers to raise your hands again, please? Thank you. It's okay to be overwhelmed. This is a lot, right? Now I was overwhelmed. And Natasha said, like, she met me in the hallway, and I think she could see it on my face last year. I was like, oh my gosh. I was kind of shaking like I am right now, but it was different then. Now it's just because y'all are really pretty looking. So, it's one of those things where I was overwhelmed. The research was a lot, and it blew my mind. So I'm continually wrapping my head around the concepts, the data. Oh, let's go back. Here we go. The results. Right? When we look at all of the things that have been posted here, all the IARC information, the data sets, the research, protocols, guidelines, occupational health data, cancer health data, I thought, let me hit the brakes. Not like if I'm in an engine with 1,000 gallons of water behind me, because that ain't going to stop, right? But I'm going to stop and take this in and say, hold on, I want to go back a couple steps as a researcher, use my subjective analysis and say, hold on, I'm a volunteer firefighter in West Virginia. I'm a female. I've got some experiences. I've seen some things on scene, right? And we're going to look at the fire service and culture and the history of the fire service. Brian mentioned a little bit. You can see it in the literature. You can listen to the podcast and the YouTube, right? You've got National Fire Radio is something that I mentioned here. We're talking about being aggressive or being safe, and there's a battle, and I'm not going to get into that into this meeting because, maybe the researchers don't understand what's happening culturally in the fire service right now, but we have almost like a battle there, and it's right. We can do both. And we're going to try to bridge that gap and do both, right? So as we move forward, we're looking at all the great work that you all do. If you're a researcher, can you raise your hand? Thank you. If you publish, if you work for an entity, thank you for doing all your good work. But I want to take it to another level and kind of say, all right, well, we talk about culture. We talk about how we interact, how we don't interact, how we clean our gear, how we don't clean our gear. There's data. The data is the story, right? We're talking about the qualitative expertise of researchers and how we can gather the data that might be missing. Why do we not do this? Why do we wash the wheels? I have data, and hopefully in my analysis, I'll share the story of what one of the firefighter respondents had mentioned about why we wash the wheels, right? Why we grease the wheels, okay? So we're going to look closely about other ways of thinking about the data, all right? So again, thank you, and Chief Lieb, thanks for your experience today, because we kind of crossed some same concepts, right? So when we looked at the research going into my reasoning, and then I went ahead and started asking those questions, right? So I went and started talking about some ideas and how I could develop a research question or an objective, right? Because I can't just say, hold on, we don't do it like that. I need to show that we don't necessarily still take some of these actions that you all tell us we need to take. And then I dug in a little bit deeper of why not? And that goes into the semi-structured interview. So what I did was I looked at a photo voice project. Raise your hand if you know what a photo voice project is. Okay, I got three people in a room of, what, 100? I'm not good at counting. I never won the marble count in the jar, right? I never won that. I was way off. 3 people in a room of 100 plus. So we looked at a photo voice project, right? Also, these young guys are really good at carrying around cameras and taking pictures of everything, right? So I was like, oh, cool, take your camera and let's go. Sorry, aging myself. Their cell phones, there's a camera on the phone, so they take their phone and take pictures. They're like, we can do that, right? So we're gonna look at a photo voice project. And what I did there is I reached out and I said, Chiefs, I went to a local Chiefs meeting. I said, Chiefs, I'm gonna need you to help me out with my research. They're like, okay, I got the blessing. Showed up to their meeting nights, fellow researchers in the volunteer fire service. When do you go to do research? Meeting nights, right? What do you bring? Probably an oatmeal cream pie, which is a reference to something later, right? That's what we do, right? So I went to the meeting nights and I said, hey team, I'm recruiting volunteer firefighters. Anybody who identifies as a volunteer firefighter over the age of 18, speaks primarily English, and then of course we're firefighters. So the comments were, I don't know what I identify this week as, right? Like, I got the comments, but I kept doing the research, right? And so they helped. I learned through the research process that in order to get that research at a sustainable level, I had to be there and encourage them in real time to say, hey, bub, I'm gonna need you, let's go. Let's take those pictures right now. I got my calendar. I'll come back in a week at 7:30, right? Like, do these pictures for me right now, get them on there. That was more effective than just saying, hey, here's a flyer, thanks team, right? It doesn't work like that. You've gotta be there and you've gotta interact. Even though I literally interacted with them earlier in the day on a structure fire, I still needed to remind them and encourage them to participate in this research, right? So you can see some of these photo voice methods. I'm not gonna read that, you probably did because it's a boring conversation. But the idea is that it's gonna interrogate some contextually based meanings, of course, from the insider perspective. That's the nice thing about this room and this symposium, is that you have the insider perspective, and then you also have the variable layers. We've got legal, we've got research, we've got policy, we've got implementation. So you have all of that. So we're gonna look at how we can construct some realities and cultures, and how we can also change the culture. How do we change it, right? So that's some photo voice methods breakdown. When we look at the demographics, where's Addison? Is he in the room or is he hanging out? Girls are like, no, he's in the hallway. No. Testoff actually, oh, he left to do research stuff? Cool, awesome, good. He helped me out last minute. He said, all right, let's pull some demographics together. Again, volunteers, the best way to teach what happens is we have our cell phone devices, or we have a pager, those still exist, or we carry a radio, depending on what kind of cell service we have in the hills, right? And it goes off in the middle of the night and we go down to station. And then we get in the truck and we go out to the call. And then we come back at some point later that morning, right? That's how it works. Or we're at work. And if our employers allow us to leave, we go, run a call, come back. Or we're hanging out with our families, having dinner, get a call, go, come back, things like that, right? So we have other jobs. We have other employment that actually pays the bills. And then when you're looking at the demographics, again, this is just a little bit. If you look really tiny there, the blue collar, most of us have blue collar jobs, or most of the respondents had blue collar jobs, excuse me. Most of the respondents had blue collar employment, okay? So that's one of those interesting things. And again, when we're getting into this research, we're looking at some preliminary data, right? So this is still ongoing. It takes time, theme of yesterday. It takes time to analyze this data. I'm trying to hurry because I want to get the results out there, but it really does take time. So when we're looking at some of the methods in which I code and how we do this for qualitative research, we put it in vivo. It's a coding software, right? So every time I had a picture, we'd move it over, we put it in the document, right? We put it in the file. Every time we had actually 92 pictures for promoting health and safety, and I'll get into that in a second, and then also risks to health and safety. Every time we had those photos, we moved them into this database. And then when I went and interviewed folks, I moved those interviews into the database. And then, like Brian's image said, I was really banking on his stuff, is where you kind of break it down and you go from like the piece of paper, and then you have your little things, and you have your smaller ideas, right? That's what I did in this research. So the questions I posed to the firefighters, again, I had to hit the brakes. I said, I don't want to bring up cancer. I want to bring up health and safety, because I don't think we are even thinking about cancer. How do we take some steps back? So we asked about health and safety, and we asked about risks to health and safety. So we were able to collect that data. So I said, hey, take 5 pictures of things in your station or your department that are promoting health and safety. And then while you're out there, take 5 pictures of things in your stations or your departments that show risks to health and safety, right? Anybody want to know why we stuck to the in station and in your department? Because I didn't want to be the one out on the job site doing all the work while they're over there taking pictures, right? I needed more help, right? We needed more people in there. So we went ahead and did that, and we got some themes and codes, right? Again, preliminary data. We're looking at some themes and some codes, different things that they said throughout their interviews, right? Explain to me what's in this picture. Can you please describe what's in this picture? And that's how we got our data. As we're looking through our themes and codes, cleanliness. You guys have seen this before. Words matter, pictures matter, and this is a great way to tell the story, right? We've seen this. We've talked about this. This is actually a white hat. It's supposed to be white, just throwing that out there. Okay? We've seen this time and time again. Dirty, lack of resources. This one's pretty funny, and again, this is preliminary, so when you get some more information on this quote right here from Firefighter 8, it's hard for me to get it all back, taking it apart, putting it all back together. You know how many of the departments had 2 sets of gear? We don't. 2 hoods? We don't, right? So it's really interesting to see some of the same things we're still talking about after what? Kevin said 2015, right? We're still working on these things. When you look at cleanliness, some of the positive things, right? The firefighter chaplain I quoted a lot. Cleanliness is next to godliness. We still remind firefighters to wash their hands. That's actually an old COVID poster, but there's that. There's an extractor. There's some wipes for our masks and some body wipes for, when we are deconning on scene, if that was applicable for those departments. There was a thing with germs. It was really relative to a station. It might be just that station itself, but they were really into germs and not getting sick. And then we have household washers and dryers. Extractors aren't cheap. That was some of the data. But they're doing what they can with what they've got, right? And that was a theme as well. When we're looking at accountability, this one was funny because the guy looked at me, he goes, make them practice, right? Seatbelts. Basic. Well, we would think basic, right? We've been preaching seatbelts since what, 1975? Didn't you say that? I think it was 1975, sir. Yeah. This was a funny one. Accountability. Accountability for our own wellness. Accountability for our own health in our community. Remember how I said I stayed at station, encouraged them to take pictures right in real time? Guess what they were doing in real time? Smoking cigars. All right. Those are 2 different people, by the way. Those are 2 different firefighters smoking cigars. They were at least outside a station. I'm just throwing that out there. They were outside the station, right? Okay, when we're looking at accountability, again, positives of accountability. We already have protocols and guidelines for some of this stuff. We have accountability tags. That's what's on the left there, if you can't see that. Anatomical right if you're a paramedic or a doctor, right? We have comms. We have to-do lists, right? Clean your gear, wash the stuff. Clean the gear, wash the stuff. Wash the interior, mop the floor, sweep the bathroom. How does that song go? Mop the floor, sweep the kitchen. Blah, 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 blah. It's a Disney thing, right? We have these options. It's just that accountability and that enforcing. We talked about enforcement, right? When you're looking at safety officer positions, a lot of the interviewees or a lot of the respondents or a lot of the firefighters said, oh yeah, our station, sometimes we'll just assign a safety officer, it's big enough. We'll assign someone on scene if we're worried about it. That is a big key piece of data when we move forward and we start talking about implementing best practices. If it's big enough, if we care about it, right? Those are big words. If, when. Sometimes it's all the time. There's a safety officer position. Are they going to be accountable for the on-scene stuff? Are they also accountable for our health and wellness? That was a theme as well. And when we look at the environment, right? We're looking at the environment. We try to give them some space to sort their things. This is the one. We do what we can with what we got. Big thing, volunteer, rural. Kind of what we do, right? And that was from the chief. So they provide some spaces, some locker rooms. We look at some fitness equipment, right? We look at one station had some diesel exhaust capture systems, awesome. And then, there's literally a space divider for some of them. Side note, on this equipment space, that's not the facility that has the diesel exhaust capture system. That is right behind 2 engines. Have fun with that, researchers. Even if we don't use it in 20 years, we still hold on to it. Volunteer, Appalachia, we'll make some commentary about that. I got some head shakes like, yeah, we're rural. We're gonna need that. We need that elephant pack, right? There's a couple of you in the room. There's more experience in this room than I've had. You guys lose more experience every year than I can ever gain, right? Some of you firefighters have been around for, somebody said 40 years? Something like that? That's a lot. But we're still gonna hold on to that? Do we wanna hold on to the stuff that's in our bodies? Well, make that analysis, right? So we still hold on to it. Well, and the candy. Timeline, gotta consider when we did the interviews, right? There are limitations to the study, but there was candy from Halloween, right? Hey, they're holding on to some old fuel containers, things along those lines. That same station had a pile up in the corner of their department with the old AFFF foam because nobody had taken it out yet, and nobody knew how to dispose of it properly. It's still there. And then, of course, you can see that's the drain in the apparatus bay with cigarettes. If you look deeper into that, you've got some cigarettes down below. Some extra photos that help tell the story is when you're looking at things that promote health and safety. Again, that was the question, one of the questions, okay? We're looking at 2 quotes. If you paid attention, there's 2 quotes from Firefighter 23 in this presentation. There was a juxtaposition of his own personal responsibility and the physical wellness of himself, along with wanting to increase standards and like how we would have more standards in the volunteer fire service. But he was literally battling his own I need to take better care of myself versus standards saying, well, who's gonna implement that? Who's gonna say you have to do this? So he's battling that scenario in real time during the interview. But again, they're trying to do better, right? We're trying to do better. We're trying to take care, use what we have to be well. Some of the other risks, there's that oatmeal cream pie I talked about, all right? One of the wildlands guys who goes out, he's a volunteer firefighter. He identifies as a volunteer firefighter, but he also goes out and does paid on-call stuff for wildlands. He said, how hard can you push people who volunteer their time? A lot of the respondents said, we don't have people lining up around the door to join our department. It was in the 70s, right? It's changed. The culture has changed. The slow down fire department, you know what that's for? That is for when they go out on a call, an MVA, which is most of their calls that they run, and they have to make sure the community slows down because there's a scene up ahead, right? There are things that they try to use to protect ourselves in some manner, right? To protect our safety and our wellness. But then again, how can we continue to improve on that and provide those resources? When we look at some key takeaways, I went ahead and used the Appalachian Regional Commission. Anybody in rural areas? Can I get a rural? Got 1, 2, I think we have 3 rural areas. Hey, Chief, what's up? I see you over there, right? It's different than coming down here. You guys lined up your Coral Gables. Are they even in here? They lined up their trucks outside. I was like, nice. Look at those apparatus. Look at that. Almost took the key, right? But it's different. They're 2 different cultures, right? Again, this is preliminary data. This is still under analysis, and we're looking at how we can have culturally appropriate strategies. How can we educate? How can we prevent? I see Chelsea back there. Right? How can we have culturally appropriate strategies to help raise this awareness? Right? There are stations in West Virginia that have dirt floors. Kevin had mentioned that about another one, right? Those stations are just so old and resources might be so lacking that they've just worn a hole in the floor, okay? So again, I hope that I can remind myself to let this data tell the story. So when we're looking at key takeaways, for researchers, I encourage you to keep asking questions. Again, we had another question earlier just now when Brian was talking, right? Consider social science heuristics, a new way of thinking about the problem. That's something that we talked about here. When we talk about leadership and development, and we look at the change in the fire service, and the young guys and girls who are really in a paid department showing that enthusiasm, right? Subjective data, right? We're going to anecdotal data right now, but versus this is how we've done it, this is where we're at. You can't just clean house and start all over. Nobody would be there to run the call. And if I use one of the respondents' quotes, he said, the safest thing to do would be not to run the call. This is not a safe job. This is not a safe job. And then he continued on to say, but if we didn't run the call, who would be there for that 9-year-old who's in the back of the car in that MVA? Right? It's a job that we sign up to do. So how can we make those or take those preventative steps? By doing research, by educating our administrators and our policymakers about the fiscal awareness and how they can actually support and encompass all the different realms of science and outreach and education to make a difference. And then the last key takeaway for us, it's not every day somebody walks out with a save. Our department's been there for 50 years. We've had one save. What if we changed that mindset? What if we went and looked at the LODDs? What if we started making saves for each other? What if we reduce or mitigate, right? That's another word. What if we reduce or mitigate our exposures? What if we learn how to be well? Wellness is all encompassing. There are 8 dimensions. Look it up. And what if we participate in research? That's going to give us the data to transform the fire service. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll take any questions from the audience or from folks online for fellow Foster.
Okay, no questions. Great. Just kidding. Do you have any questions?
No, you're not off the hook that fast. Yeah,
Yes,
we have a couple
sir.
of questions for you.
Chief, sorry. Oh, Sam?
Oh, that
Who
one?
allowed
Really?
them? Who gave him the microphone? Yes, sir.
So thank you so much, and I really appreciate your presentation, the Panhandle recently, and obviously today as well. What would be your advice to, in our area, as far as to our paid departments? How can we help kind of bridge that gap with volunteers? What are some ideas that you might give us regarding ministering to the volunteer base?
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. So recap for the question, if anybody had a hard time hearing that, how can we bridge that gap together? And this is where you get, Dr. Hamlin, this is where you get into, let's talk with the insurance companies, let's talk with the physicians, let's all get our scheduled physicals. How do we provide that? I'm gonna make those calls. Other docs, sorry, I see you over there, love. Hey, you're looking at screen. Hey, sorry, I forgot your name. How do we make those connections and say, all right, well, let's go to the local DO school, let's train them on what it means to be a firefighter, and let's get those students who want to make an impact ready to screen us. Let's bring them to us, right? That is an all call for anybody watching from the DO school. Okay, great. Right? That's it. How can we do that? Paid and professional. You guys have resources we don't have. You all have presumptive eligibility. And in West Virginia, I don't, right? So how do we bridge that gap? Do we change policy? Do we share resources? Do we make sure we just cover everybody who's going to sign up to give their life? I didn't say this, but the firefighter chaplain, you know he quoted Jesus. He did. He said, John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. He quoted that. I got to give him a shout out because that's what he shared. That gentleman is 74 years old and was the oldest to complete Firefighter 1 in the state of West Virginia. Like, that's a big deal. And he's willing to do that, right? He's willing to do that. What if we actually continued to do the research and did the prevention work and said, let's get everybody screened. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's get you some resources. Come on over. Can I borrow your extractor, right? Can I bring my gear to your station and just wash it? Is that an option? That's a simple option, right? Maybe I could do that. I think, Chief, you had a question as well, sir?
Before we do that,
Oh,
I wonder,
sorry.
Chief, sorry, Chief O'Neill, do you have any perspective too from the other way, looking at paid fire department collaborating with volunteer fire departments?
Yeah, so in Texas, particularly in San Antonio, we have a lot of rural fire departments that surround us. And one thing that we realize, and because typically we're inward looking, most departments are, we're worried about ourselves. As we started to branch out, as Dr. Hamlin mentioned, with our wellness fairs and to start to open ourselves up, we realized just how limited resources the surrounding fire departments have. And by just inviting them in, even though many didn't come to the wellness fair, they still reached out to us in email for advice on how to start cancer committees, on advice on decon, and sharing that information is the first step. So that's where we're at right now. But ideas like sharing extractors and different resources, we already have that concept with mutual aid. So we do that. We help them when they need help. They come help us when we need help. So why not just extend that to this?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right, Chief Lee, you're up.
So first off, thank you for volunteering,
Yes, sir.
and thank you for your enthusiasm. So a couple of points. I think when we think about presumptive legislation, as you mentioned, New York State has presumptive legislation for volunteer firefighters as well as career firefighters. All firefighters are professional firefighters.
Yes, thank you.
And there's been recent wins around the country. Look at Pennsylvania. The governor has it in his budget. Look at Kansas, in particular Wichita, but Kansas as a state as well. So we're seeing some momentum carry on. So it's possible. It's as Chief Quinn mentioned, grassroots advocacy, all the different organizations. It's everybody pulling on the same rope in the same direction is important. But I want to comment on something that you talked about earlier, and that's 2 sets of bunker gear. We've done such a good job of marketing the message of needing 2 sets of bunker gear that we've kind of lost the point of it, which is rural departments, as you pointed out, don't necessarily need 2 sets of gear. What they need is a bunch of spare sets of gear that when a second set is needed for a particular firefighter, that they have a set that works, a set that fits them. So that doesn't mean 2 sets. If you're, and it saddens me to say this, but we have departments around the country that are running pancake breakfast and spaghetti dinners so they could buy new hose or pay for gas for the apparatus. That should never happen. But that happens, and if that's happening, we can't be spending money on 2 sets of gear that might sit there for a while. So just having enough where we have spare sets of gear, whether we're pooling resources with other departments around us or whatever it takes to do that, make sure that that the message is the proper message. Thanks for what you do.
Yes, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Yes, Kevin.
Yes, I want to follow up on Sam's question. What can you do? What can we do between career and volunteer? I would love to see us having a formalized adopt a department program where your department finds that other department and reaches out, and it might be an extractor, it might be training. So anything we could do to look at the possibility of adopting a program, a formal program that we could get those progressive departments that have the resources to help out those that don't. Because in America, there are over half of our fire departments are less than 2,500 population. So that's over half of America. Most of those could use your help.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Sir, back there.
Good morning. Nice presentation.
Thank you, sir.
As someone who started as a volunteer when I was 14 and was a department training officer for a volunteer company. And then during my career with CAL FIRE, we have many communities throughout the state that are volunteers. So how we do it is we invest in training with them and in shared resources. And if you invest, you get a return for your investment. And I think what's happening with the initiative that's going on here, that's at this university and everybody that's here, is the investment will have a return on it for everybody on prevention and then also how to treat with that. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of encouragement. I fully understand how difficult it is to be able to overcome that when you have a steak appetite but a flapjack bankroll, so to speak.
Oh,
But thank you
lunchtime,
for your
right?
presentation.
Thanks for that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Look, for Lara and also for Brian, I'm curious, after 50 years of being in the service and helping try to bring this initiative in Florida, when you come in with your credentials and you're doing scientific research, does that scare some of the firefighters, and do you get some pushback, or how do you work to get buy-in so that they're not thinking like, oh, they're studying me?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I could speak to that. I have to be careful in my own department with my rank because I don't want the firefighters to think that I'm ordering them to talk to me in some way. So I prefer to do my research outside of my department. So it is kind of a weird space to be in, but I think it's important. But we do have a lot of people in our department who need their voice heard. So, you know, I work through ways to get their voices heard in our department outside of research. But ultimately, what we're looking for is for the entire fire service.
Thanks, Brian. I wore my pants, my fire department T-shirt, and my radio on my strap. I took the apparatus, one of the utility vehicles, over. I said, "Hey, team, gonna need your help." So I made it kind of casual, so they wouldn't be as intimidated. Now, during the semi-structured interviews, they were a little nervous because I whipped out that fancy iPad, right? Shout out to my niece, right? She gave me an aunt pen, so I could FaceTime them. But then I used it for my research, and they got nervous because they were being recorded. So that was interesting. That was an interesting research objective or concern there. So I wonder how much they held back. So you'd have to, as a researcher and as a firefighter, encourage them. You know, when I kept asking why, some of them got tired of it. But it was one of those things that really brought some data out, brought some stories out. So, yeah, thank you.
I wanted to add something to the researchers in the room. If you're doing research on fire departments, there's a hierarchy in fire departments, and if you're doing focus groups in particular, you need to kind of be aware that there's a rank structure in that focus group, and sometimes there'll be a loud authoritative person in that focus group who dominates the conversation, and you don't really grab good data because people remain silent because they're being kind of suppressed by that hierarchy. So you need to try to get focus groups together where it's similar rank or rank is out the door, and that's said from the beginning, but you have to keep into account the culture of the fire service.
All right, any last minute question? Yeah, Maddie.
I have a question for both of you because your research is amazing. So thank you. In your questionnaires and as you progress, have you encountered group thinking that motivates people who have individual thoughts to think as the informal leader or the formal leader? Because that's one thing that I've noticed, that if you grab them individually, they will answer you differently than when they're in a group, because part of it is fitting within their group. So have you encountered that? And if you have, how have you approached it so you can get a more of a response to their nature?
Interesting. Can I go ahead and get some feedback? So thank you for that question. You remember the comments I made about the germs? And there was the Lysol spray and the hand sanding. That came from one department. That department, I don't know about you all, but in Appalachia, when they started a bunch of the volunteer fire departments in the 70s, recently, a couple years ago, families would join, right? And that was a little code that I noted in some of this research. You know, they say they're not lining up around the block. that, you know, it used to be a family thing, there still happened to be a family present in that specific station. So when I interviewed multiple firefighters who happened to be the same family members, it was really interesting that they all mentioned a few key concepts, right? The germs, the cleanliness, and things along those lines. So not necessarily like, oh, we don't do that here, but like we try to do this here, almost in that positive realm of that influence in that specific department was very influential based off of those members. So that was an example of something I think I picked up in some of the research that we collected.
I'm so happy to hear all these questions from the audience.
We have one comment from online.
Okay, and that'll be our last one.
Better not
sorry.
be one of my guys.
Someone asked if you could comment on the biggest hurdles that you experienced during the Photo Voice project.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
The biggest hurdles that you experienced during the Photo Voice project.
The biggest hurdles of experience. Well, I mean, I'm still analyzing the data, and that takes a while. That's a hurdle, but hopefully the influence of Dr. Caban saying, get it together and get it done. Right? I need that old fire service kick down the door mentality to get this done, but I think that's one of the big hurdles. Specifically, and I'll be honest, as a researcher and as a person who has a primary occupation, and then as a firefighter, when I was trying to run all the calls and do all of this work, it took a lot out of me, right? And when you have those fellow firefighters starting to talk about their mental health concerns, you know, that takes a lot out of you as well. And that I think that honestly is one of the hurdles also that I face is like, this is hard, but it's also getting ready to push through and going to make the save. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Really, on behalf of Natasha and I, it has been a privilege this past year to be, you know, with both of you and watch these projects grow and develop. And like I said earlier, in many ways, you have both been our teachers in learning how to work better with the fire service and collecting data. And we will continue on the next couple of months to, you know, wrap these projects up and get them to fruition. So thank you for what you both have done for the fire service and for cancer prevention.